Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Prococo, and I am the Director of Transfers, Refunds, and Enrollments at the MTRS. And I will be presenting today's webinar on the special election for R Plus that we have going on right now. I recognize a lot of the names on the registration, so I'm glad that you could all make it today. I really appreciate all of you taking the time to join today's session, especially during school vacation week and taking the time to join us today. So I know a lot of you have great questions that you supplied during the registration, and I believe we're already getting some in the Q&A. Um, a lot of people ask us, will these slides be available, or will I be able to see this video in the future? And we are recording today's webinar, and we will post it on the website, so you'll be able to reference that at any point in the near future. So like I said, we got a lot of questions during the registration, and we've gotten a lot of these questions over the last several weeks. So we tailored today's training on a lot of your questions. So every once in a while in this training, we'll stop and have a Q&A section. So if you have questions about anything that we've covered in the previous session or section, that will be the time to ask. But a lot of the questions we got, you can see them right here on the screen. So what is Retirement Plus? What are the pros and cons? How do I decide if R Plus is right for me? I thought I was already in R Plus. How do I find my contribution rate in R Plus status? I already contribute at 11%. Does that mean I'm enrolled in R Plus? I am contributing at 9 plus 2. We should call that the dreaded 9 plus 2, which equals 11%. Am I all set? And then the $1,000,000 question, how can I estimate the potential cost? Then how can I pay? Or can I pay in installments? Or can I have a payment deducted from my paycheck? We will cover all of this and a lot more. So rather than asking right away, I would say just wait, and we will cover all of this throughout the presentation. So recent legislation, which is Chapter 134 of the Acts of 2022, that's the new R Plus law. There are a few things in that new law, but one of the most important things is that this law offers a one-time opportunity to elect to participate in Retirement Plus. So everyone that was invited to this seminar today is eligible for this election that is going on right now. And we have a couple employer users that have joined us as well today too. So if you are a member that transferred in from another one of the other 103 retirement systems across the state between July 1st, 2001 and June 30th, 2022, so within that window of time, you became a member of the MTRS during that time as well. You weren't part of the original election, which happened in 2001, and you did not submit a Retirement Plus election by December 31st, 2022. You are eligible for this election. So throughout that time span, if you didn't respond to that election opportunity, the way the law used to be written is that you would not be in Retirement Plus, but it has now changed to give you this one-time election. So what do you need to do? So ultimately, you have to vote. You should respond by June 30th, 2023, because you are not in Retirement Plus if you have not responded yet. Even if you're at 11%, you think you might be in, or you see a +2 deduction, it does not mean you are in Retirement Plus. You must respond during this election prior to that date to be in Retirement Plus, or to confirm if you do not want to be in Retirement Plus. You are not automatically enrolled at this moment if you have not responded. So the elections were mailed out the beginning of January, I want to say mid-January, and the envelope looks like the one that you can see on the screen right now. So there's a vote button on there. You can see the R plus symbol, that it's urgent, that a ballot is enclosed, and that you should respond. So a lot of people don't really understand what Retirement Plus is or how the pension system works in the state of Massachusetts. So if you're a public employee that is eligible for a retirement system, you have a defined benefit. So you're under a defined benefit plan versus a defined contribution plan. Defined benefit is a retirement that you are going to receive for the rest of your life. Defined contribution is where you might contribute to a 401k, you ride the market. When you retire, you have a set amount of money, and then that's what you have for your retirement. So the defined benefit and the defined contribution plans are different. In Massachusetts, the defined benefit plan is based off of three factors. So you have your age, your years of service, and then a salary average. So at the time of retirement, if your salary average is $100,000, your age and years of service are used to calculate a percentage that you would receive towards that salary average. So the maximum percentage that you can get is 80%. So you might hear people say, I want to get to my 80%. I need to get to my 80%. That is because that is the highest percentage you can get. So if you have the 100,000 salary average, you reach the 80%, you have an annual pension of $80,000 for the rest of your life. It is that defined benefit that you would get. It is guaranteed regardless of what's happening in the market, and you get it for the rest of your life. So what is the R plus benefit? A lot of people wonder, why do I need Retirement Plus, or why should I be in Retirement Plus? And Retirement Plus isn't for everyone, but for a lot of people, R Plus gets you to that 80% faster. Once you hit 30 years, the difference between a regular retirement and a Retirement Plus retirement or Retirement Plus calculation increases by 12%. And we have tier charts online that you can look at to see where you might fall on the grid because everyone's situation is different. And we'll show an example of that on the next slide. But the most important thing is that a member must be eligible and participating in R Plus in order to receive that enhanced benefit. So you're eligible after you hit 30 years of service, and 20 of those years have to be with the MTRS or the Boston Retirement System as a teacher. The other 10 can be from your service from your other previous retirement system or through a service purchase. But you have to have at least 30 years of service to be eligible. And the R plus contribution rate is a flat 11% of your earnings. And I just wanted to mention for those that may have joined late, this presentation is being recorded and we'll have it on our website. So you'll be able to view the beginning of the presentation once we have it online. So earlier, I mentioned that chart that you have. So if you look at the percentage chart, if you focus in on that row that has 30, that's years of service, and then you move over to, we'll say, the age of 55. With a regular retirement, you would have 45% of that salary average. So if we use the $100,000 example, that's a $45,000 pension for the year, or every year for the rest of your life. But if you had R plus, you would get 57% of that 100,000, and that would be 57,000 for the rest of your life. So that's how you read that chart, how you navigate it. Everyone's situation is different, so you can look at it and see where you might end up on the chart. A lot of people ask, how is the retirement funded? So there are three sources of how that benefit, that defined benefit, is funded. So you have your employee contributions, the contributions that come to the retirement system, that is used to fund part of your benefit. Then we have employer contributions that come from the state, that the state gives the pension plan every year that helps pay for these benefits. And then we have investment earnings, where the money that you contribute to the system is managed by PRIM, and that is used to pay the retirement benefits. So Massachusetts has one of the best pension systems in the country, and Prim is doing a great job. So we are very fortunate to be part of this system. And now we take a look at the contribution rates. And as you can see, looking at this screen, it is complicated in the state of Massachusetts, but we are here to try to explain this and make better sense of it. So if you focus in on that middle column where it says not participating in Retirement Plus, and you go all the way down to the bottom, we're going to work our way up from that point. If you were a member before January 1st of 75, your contribution rate was 5%. Then as you move up in the rows, if you started between January 1st of 75 through December 31st of 78, your contribution rate was 7%. You were established at that rate. And one thing that's important to understand is if you establish at 5% and then you worked all your way up through the future, you don't contribute those higher rates. You're locked in at that lower rate because that's when you were grandfathered, or you grandfathered that rate in the system based off of when you started. Then on January 1st of 79, things got complicated in the state of Massachusetts when it comes to contribution rates because the plus 2% on earnings over $30,000 per year were added to the contribution rates. So we'll call that the plus 2. So anyone that started from January 1st, 79 through December 31st of 83 is 7 plus 2. Then you move up to January 1st of 84. If you start between that window of 1184 through 630.96, you were established at 8 plus 2. So that's 8% on all of your gross earnings, and then 2% on any earnings that you make over $30,000 a year. Then for members that started between July 1st of 96, between 96 and June 30th of 2001, had 9 plus 2 taken out as their rate. And I believe that's a majority of the members that we have in the system today and part of the special election, where people refer to that rate as 9 plus 2. And of course, 9 plus 2 does not equal 11 in this case, and we'll get into that through future slides. But as we move up the scale, you can see that on July 1st, 2001 through April 1st of 2012, if you started in any other retirement system across the state, you established your rate at 9 plus 2. So that's the 9% on all of the gross earnings and 2% on earnings over $30,000 a year. But one thing that's different between the other boards and the MTRS in Boston is that if you established your public membership with the MTRS or Boston, then you were mandated to contribute at 11%, which is the Retirement Plus. So many of you probably had 11% withheld when you started at your school district because you started with the MTRS within that window of time. And when you start, we don't know about that other service until a little bit later on into your teaching career. So if we move up the scale, you can see after, on or after April 2nd, 2012, this is when we had a pension reform in the state and the contribution rates changed again. So if you started anywhere else in the state of Massachusetts, your rate started out as 9 plus 2, but then after 30 years of service, that is reduced by 3%. And same with Retirement Plus, if you establish membership with the MTRS or Boston on or after that date, as a Tier 2 member, you would be at 11%, and then after 30 years, that rate is decreased by 3%. So the difference between 11 and 9 plus 2, a lot of you might be wondering what this difference is because it causes a lot of confusion in Massachusetts, especially for our members because we offer the 11% for R plus. So the rate for R plus is a flat 11% on all gross earnings. One of the lower rates that we just talked about from the other slide is the 9% on everything with an additional 2% taken on earnings over $30,000 per year. So this is commonly referred to as 9 plus 2 or 9 and 2, or people might refer to it as the plus, or they hear the word plus and they think it is retirement plus. And like I said earlier, 9 plus 2 does not equal 11% for retirement plus. It is very confusing. In Massachusetts, for MTRS, the public pension system, 9 plus 2 does not equal 11%. Maybe we should start calling this the new math in Massachusetts because it's kind of difficult to understand, but we're here to explain that. The monetary difference between the 11% for R plus and the lower rate of the 9 plus 2 is $600 a year. That is just the way the math works out. No matter how much money you make, that is the monetary difference between the two rates. So I'll say this again. Even if you have been contributing at 11%, not the lower rate of 9 plus 2, the entire time you've been with the MTRS, you are not currently in Retirement Plus, and you have to respond during this election. So we'll have an example of how the 9 plus 2 is calculated and the difference between the two rates. So we have Joe Teacher. He transferred in from another retirement system. His annual salary is $58,000 and he is paid over 26 pays. And the pays is important because it'll help us calculate that additional 2% amount, which we'll get into on the next slide. But if Joe decides he wants to be in R plus, 11% of his gross biweekly earnings, which is $22.3077, he would contribute $245.38. At the lower 9 plus 2 rate, if he decides to opt out of Retirement Plus, he would have 9% taken on that $22.3077, which is $200.77. And then he would have an additional 2% contribution on earnings over 30,000, which amounts to 2154. So when you add the two amounts together, it equals $222.31, and that is the total 9 plus 2 amount. So you can see the two amounts are different. The 9 plus 2 rate is lower, and the difference in one pay period is 2307. So when you take that and you multiply it by 26, you get the $600 a year. And like I said earlier, that difference is always going to be $600 a year when it's the difference between the 9 plus 2 and the 11. It doesn't work out that way for lower rates, and we'll get into that later and explain how that's calculated. So when we talk about the additional plus 2% on earnings over $30,000 a year, it's not as simple as just taking your annual salary and then subtracting it by 30,000 and then dividing that by the number of pays that you have. PERAC, which is the agency that governs all of the retirement systems across the state or oversees all of the retirement systems across the state, says that we have to do it on a per pay period basis. And I believe that is because there are situations where people start mid-year, they don't make 30,000 and people might not have the additional 2% taken. But this is designed so it's withheld on a per pay period basis. So in order to simplify this and break it down even more, if you were to think of someone that had an annual salary of $30,000, so they make 30,000, they get paid over 26 pays, their biweekly pay would be $1153.85. So if you look at this chart and you look over to the right, if they make 30,000, that is what their pay is going to be. So if you make more than that, anything over that 1153.85 is subject to the additional 2%. So in Joe's case, you subtract 1153.85 from that 2230.77 amount, and that leaves the 1076.92 for earnings that are subject to that additional plus 2%. And in this case, I believe we don't have it on this slide, but it is 2154 for that additional 2%. So that's how this is calculated. I know this is a lot of information, and we have this on our website, and it'll also be available on the video. So if you want to go back and try it on your own, you can do it at a later time. So I think we're going to stop now and take some questions over the sections that we just went over, the material that we just covered. So I will wait to hear those questions.
Hey, Dave. We do have a number of questions and answers going on in the chat, which is great. A lot of activity there. We do have a couple of questions that many people are asking, and I'll address those now. The first one is, how do I get a new ballot? And there have been a number of people in the chat asking that question. If you need a replacement ballot, you can email us at retirementplus@trb.state.ma.us. That email address will be in the slides later in the presentation, so you can take note of it then. And as I said, these slides will be available after the presentation today. So you can email us, we'll request a replacement ballot for you. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that it will take at least 2 weeks for the replacement ballot to arrive. We are doing it through an election vendor due to the volume. So please allow 2 weeks for the ballot to arrive. And please know that if you request a new ballot, they will issue a new code and a new PIN for voting, for vote tracking. So if you happen to find your original ballot, that one will be null and void. So please be patient and wait for the new one. The next question is, and a couple of people put this in the chat, that they can't hear the voice. We've only had a couple of instances of people stating that the voice is going in and out. If you're having any problems with the audio or the video, the best thing to do is to leave and rejoin the session. And the next question is, what is the website? Our website, again, we'll cover this during the presentation, but the easiest way to get there is to go to www.mass.gov/MTRS. And that's all the published questions we have for now, Dave.
Okay, great. And that was Scott, our Director of Communications. Thank you, Scott. All right, so we will go to checking your R+ status in MyTRS. So MyTRS is an online portal that we have that you can log in and view your retirement information. So if you log into MyTRS, if you don't have an account, you just need your social and your date of birth to create the account. Go online, we have two-factor authentication. You should be able to log in and see this information. So once you log in, you click on retirement account, which is to the left of the screen. Then you click on MTRS membership and account summary. Once you click on that link, you can open up your account summary and you will be able to see your contribution rate and your R+ status. So a lot of questions, or we've gotten a lot of questions on how long it will take to see when someone's status has been updated in MyTRS. We currently have reps that are working on changing statuses manually in the system now. So once we receive the election, we're not doing this once we actually receive the election, we're doing them in batches. So there are about almost 8,000 people that are part of this election. And it is going to take time for us to go in and manually change these. However, we are working on it. So after you've made your election, I would give it probably a month or two before you see this update made in the system. So once you've elected in, or if you have elected to participate, that will change and say participating, and the rate will change to 11%. So this doesn't necessarily mean that you have 11% taken out or that this is the current rate that's being withheld from your paychecks. This is just the rate that we have for you in the system and what we should expect. So if you need to see that, you can log into MyTRS and view it there. Now, a lot of people, they don't know how to see what rate is being withheld from their pay stubs. And we thought it was important to show some examples of how you can actually do that. And I just want to thank Diane and Debbie for giving me these examples to show today, because I think that they're going to be really helpful. So first, if we focus on people that are 11%. So as you can see here, when you look at your pay stub, and these are payroll reports, it might not look the same on your pay stub, but a lot of the codes that are used in your school's payroll software will probably translate to your pay stub. So as you can see here, the first screenshot to the left, you can see that the code is MSTR11, and that 5563 is 11% of that 1444.86 from that gross pay. So when you're looking at your stub, you can look at your gross pay, multiply it by 0.11 for 11%, and that is what your retirement contribution should be if you're at the 11%. So you can see here in the next screenshot to the right, the code is SCH 11%. And you can see the gross amount of 2276.81 and the contribution is 250.45. So that's 11% of those earnings. Then at the screenshot below, you can see the $3,300.35, and then the code there is 11% SC RET 367.69. So you can see that that is 11% of what those earnings are. So you can see here there's 3 examples. There are 3 different codes for that retirement deduction, and every school might do it differently. And I can tell you over the years, it's almost like you're trying to decipher the Da Vinci Code, trying to find these contributions on some of these reports. So it can be difficult, but with a little bit of training, hopefully today you have a better idea of where to find that contribution on your pay stub. So now we'll go to the 9+2 example, and this is where things get confusing and where people might think they're in Retirement Plus, they're not, but you can check and see what you are currently having withheld from your pay stub. So if we focus on the example to the left, there is one code that says PMTRB, and you can see 359.71 for the contribution. The earnings above that are 3,996.83. So that is 9% of those base earnings. And then lower to the left, you can see QMTRB2, 56.86. And people might see that 2% contribution and think that extra is being withheld and think that you're in Retirement Plus because there is an additional contribution there. But that is not the case when it comes to Retirement Plus. That is that lower, and I called it dreaded before, the dreaded 9+2, because it makes people think that they are in Retirement Plus when they are not. So another example you can see off to the right is STCH 9%. For that 9% contribution, and then you see the S add 2%, it's the additional 2%, and it's broken out on the paycheck for you to see. Then some schools do it differently, and I believe as a state employee they do the same thing with my check, is they combine both the 9+2 into one single contribution. So you know, you might look at this 5908.53, you take 11%, and it's going to be higher than that 624.94 amount. Then you take 9% from it, and you see that 9% is going to be lower than that 624.94 amount, and that's because they lump everything together. So when you try to back into the rate, you take the contributions, and then you divide it by those base earnings, you can see that it equals 10.58%. And now that you've learned about all of the rates in Massachusetts, you know that 10.58 is not one of the valid rates that you would contribute at as a member in the system. So when you do the actual calculation and you break it down, you can see 531.77 is 9% of that 5908.53, and then 93.17 is the additional 2% contribution for this member. And I believe from that school, they're on a 24 pay cycle, so it's calculated a little bit differently. But the difference per year is always going to be that $600 amount. But it's important to know that it could be lumped in when you look at your paycheck, and you should do the calculation out manually if you want to figure out what you are contributing to the system. So I know that that was a lot of information with the rates and how to find it on my TRS, how to look on your pay stub, and I highly encourage you to do that after this presentation. But does anyone have any questions about that?
Hi, Dave. We have a couple of questions in the chat. We have a very good, healthy Q&A going on the other side, but we have a few questions here that are applicable to everyone. First question is, if you elected electronically, do you need to mail one as well?
No, you do not. So if you have done it electronically, you do not have to worry about sending it in through the mail. I believe after you have confirmed your election, it asks you to print out the confirmation. So hopefully you took a snapshot of that or printed out the confirmation, so you have that proof that you elected into R+. But we receive reports from our vendor every once in a while, I believe on a weekly basis, to see who has elected. So we should have that recorded from their system.
Thanks, Dave. And similar take on that question. Some people had asked, should they do both? You definitely should not vote or attempt to vote both electronically and by paper. The processing vendor will take the first vote that you sent in, and the second one will be invalidated. Next question is, should I send my ballot in even if I'm not sure 100% that I will participate?
So what I would do is I would research all the information that we have on our website, and there is still time. You want to make an informed decision on whether or not you want to participate in Retirement Plus. And once you have made your decision, it is important to send that ballot in so we know which direction you want to go in. When you don't respond, you lose your opportunity, and we will treat it as a no election. However, it is better that you still send in your form if you feel like you do not want to be in Retirement Plus. It'll take less of the guesswork that we have to do in the future, because I can imagine that after we have this election, there are going to be people that are going to want to try to get in Retirement Plus. They're going to tell us that we didn't send them anything in the mail, or we didn't do anything to try to get them to elect or to make their election, and those people are going to be out of luck. So to make a long story short, or to make this answer short, yes, you need to submit the ballot, but make sure you read up on everything before you do that.
Great. Next question. If you will not have 30 years of service, is it a definite no to R+?
If you don't feel like you will reach the 30 years, then you may want to opt to not participate in R+, just because we'll be able to rectify your account sooner and make your account whole with the regular retirement. But if you feel like you might be on the borderline where it might be close, it's still a decision that you will have to make on your own. If you want it there kind of as an insurance policy where you think that you might make you might not think you might make 30 years now, but as you get closer to retirement, you might make the 30 years. I had a teacher in high school that I believe she elected into R+, and she ended up working 45 years. So R plus ended up not making sense for her. Electing in didn't make sense for her because she would have reached an 80% anyways without R plus. But you really have to, I guess, kind of almost predict the future in a way, and that's hard to do, but it's an important decision that you'll have to make to figure out if you're going to meet that 30 years. If you're definitely not going to meet the 30 years, then Retirement Plus probably doesn't make sense for you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Next question. Are there any exceptions to the 20-year direct contribution to teachers' retirement?
I guess the only other exception to that is that we will accept membership service while you were contributing at the Boston retirement system. So MTRS and Boston are the only places that offer Retirement Plus. Boston calls it TARP. So if you had 10 years in Boston, you transfer over here. We probably don't run into that scenario because your R plus status from Boston transfers over with you, but Boston and MTRS service should count towards that 20 years. Other than that, there's no exception. You have to have the 20 years with one of those boards.
Right. Next question. If I started on March 31st, 2003, would my 20 years be met on March 31st, 2023, or at the end of the school year?
If you worked full-time that entire time, then you would reach 20 years on March 1st, 2023. Without any, if you had any unapproved time, that could factor into it. But as I said before, it has to be full-time service, no breaks. That will get you to 20 years.
Okay. I'll take this next question. The question is, voting can be done online? Yes, you can vote. You can make your R plus selection online. However, you do need to have the address and the unique PIN and code number that comes in the ballot package that was mailed to your home. So you can't just go to the MTRS website and vote. You have to go to the election vendor's website and use the unique code and PIN that's in your ballot. And again, if you need a replacement ballot, you can email us at retirementplus@trb.state.ma.us. Next question.
One thing I just want to add to that is if you request a replacement ballot and you find your old ballot, you cannot use the code from the first ballot. The vendor is going to send you a new code, so you will not be able to use that old code. Just disregard it and wait for the new one to show up.
Okay. Next question. As a career changer, I may not get to 20 years of teaching. Should I still enroll in R+?
Probably not. If you really feel like you're not going to meet that 20-year service requirement for teaching, or 30, and to meet that eligibility criteria, then R plus probably doesn't make sense for you.
Okay, great. There are some more questions, but some of these are going to be answered by the forthcoming slides.
Okay.
So for the sake of time, I think we're going to go ahead and continue with the presentation, and we will answer these questions at the next Q&A break.
Sure. Okay, let's get going. All right, so how should I decide whether to participate? And we kind of already just covered this. So will you work long enough to meet the service requirements for R+? You need to have at least 30 years of total creditable service, and 20 has to be as a member of the MTRS or Boston. How should I decide whether to participate? So will you work long enough to meet those service requirements? If no, then you won't be eligible for R+ when it comes time to retire. You may want to opt out. If the answer is yes, and you determine that R+ makes sense for you, what you really should do is go to those percentage charts that I mentioned earlier and take a look at the chart and see where you end up on the scale. Find your age and service combination and compare that. Compare the percentages between a regular retirement and an R+ retirement. Then you can compare what the cost would be to participate, which would increase the benefits. I'll show you using an R plus decision tree, which will come up sooner. But one important thing to note that is, if you elect yes, you want to participate, you don't end up making the 30 years, then you receive a refund of the difference between what you would have paid additionally for R plus and your lower established rate that you had from your previous retirement system. So now we'll talk about the R plus decision tree. And I think that this is a big question that people have. You know, how much is it going to cost me to be in Retirement Plus? So when we look at the decision tree, you can go to our website, you'll see it there. We have 3 options. One's a flat 11%. If you've been at 11% the entire time, you're not going to owe any money. If you're at the lower rate of the 9+2 and you choose to participate, then you will pay 11% on any wages going forward. So in the example, if you're under 26 pays, you're going to contribute an additional 2307 or 2308 to your retirement that you did not pay before. However, there may be situations where you did not contribute at the 11% in the past, and you will owe contributions in order to make your account whole for Retirement Plus during your MTRS membership. We don't charge the difference from the time that you were at your other retirement board. It is just the time when you were with the MTRS. So if you've been at the 9+2 since the time you've started, and let's just say you have 5 years of prior MTRS service, so that would be $600 times 5 years, you would owe $3,000. If you have 10 years of prior MTRS service, you would owe $6,000. If you have 15 years of prior service, then that would be $9,000. So these examples, they're just for illustrative purposes only. All of the final costs will be calculated once you've made your election, just because we have to go in and do a thorough calculation of your account, because sometimes it's not so cut and dry. And when the time comes, we will give you the final accurate amount that you would owe. So looking at the decision tree, like I said earlier, if you've been at 11% the whole time, you won't owe any money. You would stay in at 11%. You would just submit your election to participate to confirm that you want to remain in Retirement Plus. And then you're basically all done. We would send you a letter saying that you're all set. The 9 and 2, I just covered these scenarios where, you know, depending on the number of years that you were at 9+2, those are the amounts that you would owe into the system. And the math is easy on that. It's $600 a year, and it should give you a rough idea of what you would owe to the system. Then you have 8+2. This is where things get a little bit more complicated and it becomes a little bit more expensive to be in Retirement Plus. So it's not easy like the $600 a year, like the 9 and 2. But if you look at each salary that's listed there, this is what the difference in contributions would be per year. So at 40,000, it would be $1,000 a year. If the average salary is 50, you would owe about 1,100. And then so on. So every $10,000 that you go up in salary, the amount that you will owe increases by $100. And again, we have this on our website, so you can go take a look at this. And if you have to figure out what you would owe, this information is there. So for example, we have Sarah Teacher down at the bottom. She has 10 years of prior MTRS service. The average wages during that service was $70,000. The retroactive cost would be about $13,000 a year. Does anyone have any questions about how those are calculated? And before we answer questions, I just want to say that and we're going to address this in the next section, is how do I figure out how long I contributed at a lower rate versus 11%? And we will get into that. So if you've asked that, we'll cover that. But if you have any other questions about what we just talked about, feel free to ask.
Hey, Dave, we do have a few questions, not specifically about what you just talked about, but we have some questions from the last section if you want to take those.
Sure.
First one is, how long will we have to pay back the extra money that is owed? And can it be a one-time payment or paid back over a certain amount of time?
Okay. I won't get into too many details because we will cover that later on in the presentation, but I promise we will cover all of that, all of those options.
Okay, great. Somewhat similar question. I know you're going to touch on this in a little bit, but if you join Retirement Plus and then decide to retire prior to the 30th year, is the additional money you have paid in returned or forfeited?
Those contributions will be returned to you. You don't forfeit those contributions because you have made an election and you don't end up meeting the requirements at the time of retirement. We will return those contributions to you.
Great. Let's see. Once I make my election and my status is changed, do deductions change then, mid-school year, or do they change in September 2023? Or is that up to the employer?
That's a great question. So we will try to change these rates as soon as we can to stop the the increasing amounts that would be owed for Retirement Plus. Like I said earlier, there's about 8,000 people that are part of this election, and we're doing the best with the resources we have. So the first step of that is actually making the status change to show that you're in Retirement Plus in the system. And once we can make all these changes, we're most likely going to do them in batches. We will send an email to your employer to change your rate, and then we are going to CC you on the email so you will be notified of that rate change. So you'll know when it's changed. And you should see it. And then once that rate has been changed, you can check your pay stub, just like using the examples that we saw earlier, to make sure that that 11% is being taken. Or if you opt to not participate in Retirement Plus, you can check and calculate to see that your rate was changed from 11 to the lower 9+2 or the 8+2, and in some rare cases 7+2.
Great, thanks, Dave. Again, we do have some questions in the chat that we know are going to be covered in the next section. So why don't we go ahead and continue? We've got a couple of good scenarios to look at coming up. So let's go through those and then we'll circle back and finish all the questions in the Q&A. Okay.
Sounds good. And great questions, everyone. Thank you for asking. So we'll cover previous rate changes and refunds from the MTRS. A lot of people have asked us about refunds they have received because we have we have defaulted them out of Retirement Plus. People have called it kicking people out of Retirement Plus. And I just wanted to mention that we're not kicking people out, or we didn't kick people out. Prior to this law change, we were operating under the way the old laws and regulations were that were in effect at the time the decision was made. Some cases took longer than others, but we followed what was going on at the time. So if this law didn't change and you received a refund, then your account would be all set right now. And if that happened, we were just operating under the way that we should have at that time. This law took about, I want to say, 5.5 years to pass. So around July 2017, when we had cases where people weren't responding, we were not sending rate changes and issuing refunds because we wanted this law to pass. We wanted this opportunity for you to happen again. And it took a while to get there, but we're here now. So the important thing is that you have this other opportunity to elect in if you want. But it's important to know that if you did receive a refund in the past, that you will have to pay that back in order to make your account whole. So this is another big question that we've gotten from a lot of people. How many years will I owe back for my retroactive cost? And this is a hard answer or hard question to answer because it will vary for every single member. We have people that have started within that 21-year window that are in a bunch of different situations. So to try to simplify it or to make it easier to understand how much you would owe, first look back at your MTRS history. You can start by looking at your paycheck after the seminar. But if you know that you've gotten a refund from the MTRS, go back to that point where we requested the rate change, and you can calculate how many years you would owe based off of that. I'm sorry, not going back to the refund, but if we did issue a refund, it would be for the entire membership, the entire time you have been a member of the MTRS. If we did not refund your previous contributions, then you would only owe back to the time when we requested your rate to be changed. So like I said before, back in 2017, we chose to not refund people in case we were in the situation today, so people would not have to pay back a refund if they wanted another opportunity to be an R+. So if your rate was changed to the lower rate back in February 2016 and you're still at that lower rate, it's estimated you're going to owe about $4,200 because from February 2016 to February 2023, you have 7 years there, and at that $600 a year, it would add up to the $4,200 or around that figure. So like I said before, due to the volume of members receiving this election, almost 8,000, it's not feasible for us to do calculations for everyone to know how much they will owe for Retirement Plus. But hopefully with this information, you can go back and do an estimate or have a ballpark on your own to know how much you would owe the system. So you want to know how long you've been a member of the MTRS, and then kind of go back from there and see if you've had any changes, and then see where you're at now. If you're at 11% or if you're at a lower rate, then you should be able to use that information to go back and do an estimate. So we have a couple scenarios here that we'll go over. The first one, we have Paul Murray, who established public service as a librarian, a public librarian at the age of 23 on July 1st, 2010, and contributed to his local retirement system. Paul's rate at the other retirement system is the lower 9+2 because they do not offer that at the other retirement boards. On September 1st, 2015, at the age of 28, 5 years goes by, he becomes a school librarian and a member of the MTRS, contributing at 11%. So when we talked about the rates earlier, the reason why 11% was being withheld is because when Paul became a teacher, we don't know about that other service at the beginning. So we don't know whether to take that lower rate or to have someone at 11%. A majority of the new teachers in the system are at 11%. They're mandated into Retirement Plus. But because we don't know about that previous service, we've always instructed schools to take that 11%. Because someday in the future, they would have the option to either elect into Retirement Plus, and then if that's the case, they wouldn't owe any additional money, or if they opted out, they would get a refund between the 11 and that lower rate of the 9+2. So the MTRS receives a transfer on 7/1/2017, and Paul did not respond to his election notices. In January 2018, when the election window is up, the MTRS requests that his school rate is switched to the lower rate of 9+2. So Paul is now part of the special election and must make an election prior to 6/30 of 2023. Does R+ make sense for Paul? So yes, R+ makes sense for Paul because he can reach the service requirements if he continues to work. If he doesn't meet those requirements, he'll receive the refund of all those excess contributions. So Paul has 5 years with his other retirement system. And if he works another 25 years, he will have 30 years of service at the age of 53. So Paul meets and exceeds that 20-year MTRS service requirement because he's got the 25 and he has 30 total years of service. At age 58, Paul will reach the maximum benefit of the 80% versus receiving a regular retirement at 63%. So if we look at the retirement percentage chart, we wanted to show you here where Paul would be at the age of 30, or not at the age of 30, at the age of 53 with 30 years of service. You can see with Retirement Plus within that row, he would get 51% of his pension, or of that $100,000 salary average. Whatever the salary average is, we just use 100,000 to make the numbers easier to understand. Versus a regular retirement where he would get 39% of that $100,000. So, does Paul have to reach the 80% in order to benefit from Retirement Plus? No, because as you can see here, at the age of 53, he'd already be receiving that enhanced benefit where he's getting 12% more than what a regular retirement would offer. But as you work your way down the scale, as you work another year and you get a year older, at the age of 58 and 35 years of service is where he would hit that 80% with R plus versus that 63% with a regular retirement. So you can see that there's a significant difference in the pension that Paul would get in this situation between a regular retirement and the Retirement Plus. So now we have our second scenario where Mary Educator, she established public service at the age of 23 as a paraprofessional on September 1st, 1993, and contributed to her local retirement system. So because she established membership prior to 96, she's in that 8+2 window where that is her lower contribution rate. So she contributes even less to the system than a 9+2 or an 11% member. On September 1st, 2013, 20 years later, at the age of 43, she became a teacher and a member of the MTRS, contributing at 11%. Because she's brand new at the time with the MTRS, we don't know about that previous service, so schools take 11%. The MTRS receives her transfer on 7/1/2016, and she does not respond to her election notices. In January of 2017, the MTRS requests that her school district switch her to that 8+2 rate because that 8+2 rate is the rate that she established at her previous retirement system. So people have the option of you can be in Retirement Plus at the higher rate, or you can retain that lower rate from the other retirement system. Mary is now part of the special election and must make an election prior to 6/30/2023, which is a Friday, I might add, if I didn't say that before. Friday, 6/30/2023. Does R plus make sense for Mary? And in this situation, no, R plus does not make sense for Mary, because Mary would need to work until the age of 63 to meet the 20-year MTRS service requirement. And at the age of 63, Mary would have 40 years of service, 20 with the local system, 20 with the MTRS. And she would have already received that maximum benefit of 80% without Retirement Plus. So you can see there on that grid at the age of 62, 40 years of service, she's already at the 80% with the regular retirement. So like I mentioned before, with my teacher that, I think she had 45 years of service. She was at R plus without electing into R plus. She would have been there with a regular retirement. So in this situation, it does not make sense for Mary to be in R plus. So like I mentioned before, the election is underway. The packets were mailed out on the 11th of January by Yes Elections. You can vote online, and you have that unique code and a PIN that's printed on the ballot to elect. Or you can mail it back to us using that paper ballot with a prepaid envelope that was sent with that ballot. So the election period ends Friday, June 30th, 2023. The online votes must be submitted by midnight on June 30th. 1 minute more, you won't be able to do it. And the paper ballots must be postmarked by Friday, June 30th, 2023. So it is really important for you to get that election to us prior to the deadline. And like I said before, if you're undecided, you don't know what to do, you still have time to research this and make an informed decision. But whether or not you want to participate in our plus, you should still send your election back to us. It is really important that we get that form so we can have the correct code in the system for you, whether you want to participate or not participate, and change it from the no response that we have in the system now. So very important that you send that to us. If for some reason, and we get these questions a lot from members throughout the years or even people from the original election, unfortunately, the way the law is written, there are no exceptions for people going through hardships or anything that might prevent you from making this election. If you get COVID a week before this deadline and you're unable to submit the election, you're not going to be in Retirement Plus. You're going to lose out on the opportunity. You're not going to get this opportunity again in the future, and it has to be done by Friday, June 30th. So if you do get COVID, hopefully you have the code, you have access to your computer, you can make the election online. But after that date, no one is going to be able to make an election, change their election. It's done after that point. So if you haven't received the ballot or you need a replacement ballot, you can email us at retirementplus@trb.state.ma.us. We'll confirm that you're part of the election, and everyone part of this webinar should be part of that election because we targeted you. You are the special people, and you will have 2 weeks, or you should allow for up to 2 weeks in order to get that replacement ballot, just like Scott mentioned earlier. So post-election steps. So what's going to happen after an election has been made and after this whole process is done? So if you've elected to participate in our plus and you've always been at 11%, we will send you a confirmation that you have always been in Retirement Plus and that you will not owe any additional money. If you have elected to participate in our plus and you have not paid 11% during part or all of your MTRS service, we will send you an invoice that has installment options for amounts that are over $1,000. And we'll go into more detail with that on the next slide. A lot of questions that you have about payment options. If you elect to opt out of R Plus and have paid 11% during any of your MTRS service, you'll receive a refund of the excess contributions. The MTRS will communicate these rate changes to school districts, so please do not ask them to change your rate. If you've made an election, you should not be asking them to change your rate. We will notify them of the rate change and we will CC you on that correspondence to the school district. So invoices and payment methods, a lot of people ask, how can I pay? So we will invoice you once we can confirm your rate has been changed. And a lot of people might be wondering, when am I going to be getting this invoice? When can I expect to start paying this amount back? Like I said earlier, there are 8,000 people that are part of this election, so it's going to take us some time to figure things out, to calculate these invoices, and to know how much you are going to owe the system. So I would imagine that invoices might not start to go out until probably the end of this calendar year or the beginning of the next calendar year, and possibly even longer than that. But one important thing to know is that interest does not accrue on these interests for the first 90 days. So the clock doesn't start ticking until we send that invoice out. And then after 90 days, that is when interest starts to accrue. And I believe the interest rate is currently at 3.5% for these invoices. So we're not charging back interest to the time you became a member with the MTRS. It is going to be when we send these invoices out. A lot of people ask us, can we pay these back via paycheck deductions or payroll deductions to the retirement system? Unfortunately, we don't have a means of collecting those through payroll, so that is not an option now. However, there is another option to pay back pre-tax, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Balances have to be paid in full prior to the time you retire. So there is some time to pay it back, but one important thing to remember is that interest doesn't start to accrue until 90 days. So if you get the invoice and then you forget to pay it, interest will start to accrue up until the time you retire. If you hit that retirement date and you meet the eligibility requirements for Retirement Plus, you are on the hook to owe back those contributions plus interest all the way up until the time you retire. So it's very important to know that those have to be paid in full prior to the time you retire. So now we have the payment methods. So you can pay in full with a personal check. Once you get the amount, you have a ballpark and you're able to pay it, you can just write us a check and that will take care of it. That is with post-tax contributions. If the amount is over $1,000, you have the option to pay over 5 years. There's a 5-year installment plan where you would make equal payments that include interest every year from the first due date that we send out that invoice. So you do have the option to break that out over a period of time. People ask us if they can pay by a credit card or by a debit card, and unfortunately, we can't accept those methods of payments. Or you can roll over from a qualified retirement plan. So if you have a 403B set up supplemental to your pension, you may be able to roll that money over and pay for either part or all of this invoice. So good news, if you have money set up there, you can use that money to roll over to pay for that. Just have to confirm with the financial institution. And if you don't have a plan, like I mentioned earlier, we're probably not going to be sending out invoices for another year or so. So there is time to save up. If you don't have one now, you can create or go to your payroll department or HR department. You can have them set up a 403B account, contribute as much as you can there, and then by the time we send you the invoice, you will have money built up on a pre-tax basis where you can send money to the plan or to us to pay for the R Plus cost. If you're on a 5-year installment plan, you can still do that where you contribute to a 403B every year, and then when the time comes for the payment, I believe it is the trust to trust acknowledgement form that you want to use, because that account is still open and you can use money from that account to pay for that installment or for the full invoice. If you're still contributing, you want to contribute to that plan. Or if you have a plan that is that you're not contributing to anymore, there is a direct rollover form that you can use to take that money and pay for that R plus invoice if the financial institution allows for it, and if it's the correct type of plan that would transfer over. And we have those plans on the direct rollover form and the trusted trust acknowledgement form, which you can find on our website. So now we'll just talk about the R plus resources that we have for both employers and members. So we have a fully revamped R plus resource center that you can go to if you just go to our website. You can see it here at the top of the slide. Scott mentioned it earlier. You go to our website, it'll be one of the first things you see. You click on that. That'll bring you to the decision tree that you saw earlier. There are links that bring you to information about your contribution rate, how the 9+2 is calculated, and I imagine that this webinar will be up in that portion of the website in the near future. So we'll have this video there. Like I said, excuse me, there'll be decision information, that decision tree, the contribution rate information. You can request a replacement ballot. We'll verify the eligibility before then. But if you have any questions, you can direct them to retirementplus@trb.state.ma.us. And over the last several months, we've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of great questions there. Hopefully we were able to resolve a lot of them by having this webinar today. So hopefully you were able to learn a lot, and you'll have this as a resource on our website. So important items for today. Everyone who received that special election package is not currently in Retirement Plus, unless you've already made a choice. If you haven't made a choice, it is very important that you send that form back to us. If you're already contributing at a flat 11% and you have been the entire time you have been a member of the MTRS, it does not mean that you are participating in R plus. You have to fill out that election form and submit it to us. If you do not respond to this election, you will not be in Retirement Plus. We will request that your rate gets changed to that lower rate, and you will not have another opportunity to be in this program. The election window closes on Friday, June 30th, 2023. And you can make that election online. But like I said before, if you're mailing it to us, it has to be postmarked by June 30th of 2023. If it's postmarked after that date, you will be considered not participating in R plus, and you will not get another chance. So you can visit our resource center that we just saw on the previous slide. You can either go to mass.gov/MTRS to go to our website and click on that link, or to go directly to the R Plus Resource Center. You can go to https://mtrs.state.ma.us/R+/. And you can email us at that Retirement Plus inbox, which is the retirementplus@trb.state.ma.us. And I think that that's it for today. We covered a lot of important information. Like I said earlier, this is all going to be on the website. You have time to make a decision, and we just want to thank you for attending today, because I know it's February break. Hopefully, some of you are in a nice warm climate, sitting by a pool. Sorry you had to listen to this during your vacation. A lot of you might be going out to shovel after this, but we just really appreciate you taking the time to view this webinar today. And hopefully you have a lot of the information you need to make your decision if you haven't made it yet. With that being said, if we have any more questions, we'll be happy to take them.
All right, thanks, Dave, and thanks to everyone who participated today. We did go a little bit over on time, so apologies for that, but we will be spending as much time as we need answering the questions in the chat. So thank you to all. So Dave, the first question is, You mentioned the 20 years of service with the MTRS or Boston Retirement Service, plus 10 years from other service. Could you explain what qualifies for other service?
Sure, and that's a great question. So with that 20 years of MTRS service, we refer to that as membership service. And the other 10 years are other service or non-membership service. So let's just say that you were a lifeguard for your local town or city, and you weren't eligible to be part of the retirement system, but you have that public service. You can purchase that service. Let's say you've accumulated 3 years working part-time. You could buy that back, and then that would count towards the 10 years for that non-membership service. Or the time that you contributed to your other retirement board that transfers over here, because it wasn't with the MTRS, we consider that non-membership service. So that is what that other service is. I usually tell people this is my example. Before I started working with the MTRS and becoming a member of the state board, I worked at my local library as a page. I used to put the books away in the library, and I only worked 7.5 hours a week, but I did that over the course of a year and a half. It fluctuated a little bit. But when I first started working here, I bought that time back. It added about 3 months of service to my time. So that would count, if I was a member of the MTRS, that would count as non-membership service because I wasn't eligible for the system, but I still worked for the public and I got a little bit of credit for it. So in the situation of a teacher, if you subbed, when you weren't a member, if you did a lot of substitute teaching, weren't eligible for the system, you could potentially buy that sub time back and add it to that non-membership service.
Great, thanks, Dave. Next question, if we roll over from a qualified retirement plan, is this something our business office can do?
They cannot do that. They can't do the actual rollover. So when the time comes, when you get the invoice, there's a form that will probably include with your invoice. We don't normally do that now, but with a lot of these cases, we probably should. So you don't have to go online to download it. We'll give you a copy of that. But once the time comes, you will have to initiate that. You fill out the first part of it, and you would have to bring that form to your financial institution, and then they would initiate the transfer or rollover from there. You give them that form, a copy of your invoice, and then they would send it over to us. It wouldn't be the school district.
A couple of variations on the same question here, so I'm just going to combine them. I have already sent my ballot in. Can I change my decision?
Yes. So you can change your decision. What you would have to do is email that RetirementPlus inbox. Send us your name and your member number, and we will contact you with a letter. And the letter is basically just you signing off on a statement that you would like to change your election. You certify what your election is. You have to sign it. We need your wet signature, and then you mail it to us. We recommend that you send it certified mail. Or even a recent recommendation is that you send it through either UPS or FedEx to get us that form. That way you have a tracking number, and they do a good job of making sure that we get that mail. So if you would like to do that, just email us and we can send you that letter.
Thanks, Dave. What are the drawbacks to electing into R+ if you are not going to meet the 30-year requirement?
So there are, I would say the one drawback is that you would be contributing to the system here where you know that you're not going to receive that benefit. And I'm not a financial advisor. I can't tell you what to do with that extra money, but that extra money would essentially go to you as base earnings. So it would be part of your paycheck every time you get paid. So rather than sending it here, you could invest more money in another retirement plan or go out to lunch every month. That money is yours to spend. So I guess that is the only drawback that you would have.
If we transferred from another state pension, do we pay back to the transfer date or the total number of years?
To the transfer date or the total number of years. Could you repeat that question, Scott?
Sure. The question is, if we transferred from another state pension, do we pay back to the transfer date or pay back the total number of years?
So I think, so first I'll address the out-of-state service. So if you were a teacher in another state, let's say New Hampshire, or I guess any other state, one of the key things is that you're not receiving a pension in that state. What you would want to do is fill out a service purchase application on our end to purchase that out-of-state service. So if you were a teacher in New Hampshire for 10 years, and that would count towards your non-membership service, you would have to buy that back with us. And every state is different in the way they handle transfers or refunds to the state of Massachusetts. However, it is possible to get credit for that out-of-state service time. Most likely that would be prior to your MTRS or your Massachusetts public service date. Because in this situation with you, you establish service with another retirement system. So your out-of-state service would be prior to that. So that service purchase is prior to that transfer, prior to the service that you transferred in. I think that's what you were asking as far as would it go back to your MTRS date or the transfer date. But it's important to know that you could get service credit for that, and it would count towards that 10-year non-membership service.
Thanks, Dave. The next question is, I received a postcard stating that my election into R Plus was received. Is this enough confirmation to ensure I am actually going to be enrolled in R Plus? I just want to make sure that there is nothing more I need to do while I wait for an invoice.
Yes, so it's confirmation we received an election. What you could do is if you have if it's a paper ballot, and you're unsure whether or not you of the election that you made, we could confirm what the election that you made. But it does take some time from our vendor to get the elections that are mailed in to get to our database. But if you made the election online, you should have that confirmation from when you made that online, and that should be good enough, because we should get those from the vendor that you have made an election.
Thanks, Dave. Next question is about the payment plan. I think they're trying to ask, when you sign up for a payment plan, is that the same thing as applying for a loan or applying for credit?
Applying for a loan or applying for credit. I would say not applying for a loan, but if you have purchased service in the past from the MTRS, it'll be kind of in the same format where we would give you 3 due dates for the cost. And then if it's over $1,000 at the bottom of the invoice, we tell you what that installment plan amount is going to be and that you would have to make every 5 years. So if you have received an invoice from the MTRS, it would be similar to that.
Great. Next question. To receive the R Plus benefit, is it required to have 30 years of service? Does this mean that if one does not reach 30 years, they pay a higher rate but receive fewer benefits?
No. So if you elect to participate in R Plus and you do not meet that 30-year service requirement, we would refund you the difference between the 11% and that lower 9+2 rate, or 8+2, whatever the lower rate is. We don't hold on to that money. We would refund it to you if you don't meet the requirements.
If we choose to elect into R Plus, do we need to notify our employer of the change?
No, so we will be notifying employers. So when the time comes, things will take time just due to the volume of statuses that we have to change. But when the time comes, we will email your employer and CC you on that email. So you will be notified of the rate change, or even a confirmation that you've already been at 11 the entire time. Or in some rare cases, if you don't want to be in R plus and you're already at the lower rate, there's a chance we've already refunded you in the past and your account is all set. And in those situations, we would just send you a confirmation just telling you that you're all set.
Great, thanks. We got a couple more. Does the website state the number of serviceable years, creditable years?
So you can, when you log into MSS, there's a creditable service estimator on there, or a benefit estimator. But I believe you could run a report that would show you the years that you have. However, just so you know, about 10 years ago, or 10, 13 years ago, we moved to this MyTRS, this online system. And when we receive payroll contributions on a monthly basis from your school, that is how we accumulate your service credit in the system. So prior to 2010, it might not have that service credit from your account. So if you do go online and you see this and you use this feature, don't freak out if you don't see all of your service there, because it's just the nature of how our system is, and the service that was part of our old system that didn't calculate service. But it should have everything that goes back to 2010.
Great, thanks. A couple more. Is the interest charged in addition to the 600 per year?
Interest will be charged. So once we send out that invoice, it's on the entire principal amount that you would owe to the system. And that's compounded on an annual basis, and that doesn't start until 90 days after we send you that invoice. So it's on the entire amount that you would owe, not just the 600. But that 600 could accumulate to a larger number. Just like we showed during the presentation, whatever that is, it would accumulate on your final amount.
Great. And I think we have one more question. A lot of good questions in here. Oh, here we go. How does taking time off for maternity leave affect time towards the 30 years of service?
Okay, that is a great question. So when you go out on maternity leave, or not even just maternity leave, but if you go out on an approved leave of absence and it's longer than 1 month, the excuse me, the teacher's retirement system will give you 1 month of service credit for that time period. So after that, you don't get any more credit, but you will receive 1 month, excuse me, of service credit for that time period that you're out.
Great, thank you. Say one more. This is the first time I've heard of R Plus since I've been getting notifications to join. Is it a new thing or has it been around for a while?
R Plus has been around for a while. So back in 2001, we had an original election, but on or after 7/1/2001, anyone who established membership here and received a transfer from another retirement system should have gotten an election opportunity to either be in R plus or retain the older, or I don't want to say older, but prior lower contribution rate from your other retirement system. So it's been around for some time. It's possible that, people get things in the mail. We would send 3 reminder letters. We hadn't gotten responses, and I'll say myself that I'm guilty of getting things in the mail and I overlook things. Life gets busy, and you might just not be thinking about retirement or, receiving a letter in the mail from the retirement system. But one thing that I will say is that I am happy that you got our notifications and that you are paying attention to this and are part of this webinar today, because it is important to know about this benefit and to make your decision.
Thanks, Dave. That's all of the questions that we have in the published chat. There are a few that we didn't take directly, but they were answered by the presentation. So I think we're good in the published chat area, and we do have a team of people in the other room going through all of the private chats. So I'll hand it back to you.
All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for attending today. We really appreciate you taking the time, especially during February vacation. I hope you enjoy what's left of it. Go out there and get some sledding in if you can. If you have kids, go enjoy the time with them. But enjoy the rest of your time. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Take care.